In this installment of the Information Literacy series on career and lifelong learning, we turn to plagiarism. What is it, how to avoid it, and why should you care? The university's policy on academic honesty can be found in the student handbook. Each student is responsible for following the rules and guidelines set forth in the handbook. Examples of academic dishonesty include plagiarism, cheating on examinations, unauthorized collaboration, falsification, and multiple submissions. Plagiarism is presenting another person's work as your own and not acknowledging in the text the endnotes, the footnotes, or the bibliography when another person's words or work is paraphrased or quoted. Submitting research or completed papers or projects created by someone else as your own work, not acknowledging the use of research sources gathered by someone else when that use is specifically forbidden by the researcher or faculty member. Cheating on examinations is using notes or text not authorized by the instructor to complete an examination, allowing another student to copy your work. Unauthorized collaboration occurs when you submit work created with a substantial amount of assistance or collaboration that was not authorized by the instructor. It is okay to ask for help. The bulk of the paper should be your own work, and you should acknowledge any assistance you receive that becomes part of the paper project. Falsification is utilizing data or information that you make up, citing sources not used, and also falsify the results of polls or experiments. Multiple submission involves turning in a paper or project that was created for another class, using or utilizing part of a paper created for another class without proper citation or acknowledgement. And this one may come as a surprise since it is your own work and you are not plagiarizing or falsified data. But if the paper was previously used for another assignment, ask your instructor permission to reuse it. Now let's get back to plagiarism. There are two types, intentional and unintentional. The intentional is copying a friend's work, buying or borrowing papers, cutting and pasting blocks of text from electronic sources without documenting, and also borrowing without documentation. Unintentional, careless paraphrasing, poor documentation, quoting excessively, failure to use your own voice. Intentional or not, plagiarism has dire consequences. You get a failing grade on an assignment. You can get a failing grade in the course, suspension from the university, transcripts, annotations that note that you were found guilty of plagiarism and academic dishonesty, and expulsion from the university, which makes it very hard to get into another one. You can avoid plagiarism by paraphrasing and summarizing information in your own words. Even when you paraphrase or summarize, citing that source is still a requirement. In fact, you should cite every source that led to your thoughts and conclusions, with one exception. And that exception is common knowledge. So, facts that are widely known or informational judgments considered common knowledge. For example, most of us know who the current president is and the most recent former president, especially if you live in the United States. The founder or co founder of Facebook is a well known fact. Now, whether or not Magic Johnson being the NBA Finals MVP in his rookie year is common knowledge, that may depend on the context or the person. So, if you are a lifelong Lakers fan like I am, then that's common knowledge from me. If you did not know that and you used that information and had to look it up, cite the source where you found it. When should you cite? When you use quotes or paraphrase, when you use an idea that someone has already expressed, the summarization of it. When you make specific reference to another person's work, in APA, that's an in-text citation. When someone else's work has been critical in developing your own ideas, any information that is not common knowledge. All these, what should you cite? Books, websites, journals, newspapers, articles and materials from electronic databases, radio or television programs, film, plays, or other performances, interviews, speeches, letters and correspondence, including email, social media posts, and government sources. All of these must be cited. So it's not just books and journals anymore. Now, let us look at examples of plagiarism. And these examples, because I don't want to get found guilty of plagiarizing myself, I'm acknowledging that these examples follows are from this source, whatever students should know about avoiding plagiarism. Here is the original source of a text. You can pause now to read it. And here is an example of how that original text was plagiarized. The text in bold shows that words and phrases were lifted from the original text. While there is an in-text citation at the end of the paragraph, there are exact phrases that should be in quotation marks. So let's compare line by line. So the original sentence, the government of Libya is arbitrarily detaining women and girls in social rehabilitation facilities. That's the key phrase. And the last phrase, locking them up indefinitely without due process. And you can see that in bold on the plagiarism side. And the second example, portrayed as protective homes, that's an exact phrase, even though the last part of the sentence is, that part is in your own words, but because there was an exact phrase that was lifted, that is plagiarism. And if we look at the next example, the last part of the sentence, due process, liberty, freedom of movement, personal dignity, and privacy. Exact phrase, even though the beginning is different, is plagiarism because that should be in quotation marks since that's an exact phrase. So here it is, paraphrased correctly. In bold, the writer is clearly stating that this information is coming from Human Rights Watch. The paraphrasing does not include exact text lifted from the original source. And you can pause the text again, pause this video again to review the breakdown of how this was paraphrased. Paraphrased correctly. Now, in bold, the writer is clearly stating that this information is coming from Human Rights Watch. The paraphrasing here does not include exact text lifted from the original source. As we see here, the sentence Human Rights Watch, in a report issued in February 2006, documented the existence of what are called social rehabilitation facilities. And if you look at that last sentence, that last phrase, sometimes for no other reason than that of, and this is in quotation marks, staining their family's honor. So that makes that correct. And here's a breakdown of each sentence that was corrected. So it's a line by line comparison again. Okay. And you can pause that if you want to take a look. In the first line that was paraphrased, the first example paraphrased correctly, the organization or author of the report is acknowledged and the years presented. In the second, the exact phrase staining their family's honor is put in quotation marks with the in-text citation at the end. The other part of that sentence has been paraphrased. And again, the exact phrase due process, liberty, freedom of movement, personal dignity, and privacy is not found in the next um, example. So this is a completely paraphrase or some summarized lie. Women and girls are kept in these places against their will with little or no legal recourse. Only male relatives can get them released. That's totally different. So let's look at quoting a source. So here, this is the original text. And again, I've acknowledged where this example comes from. And we can see in bold here the line that has been plagiarized. They did add an indeed to the beginning of the set here. The creation of New York's first bank was a formative movement. That is exact, even though there is a in-text citation there with the page numbers. So there's just a line by line breakdown of it so you can see it. And this is how you quote that correctly. So here you acknowledge the source. So when you put that source and the author in the sentence, um, you then have just the page numbers for the in-text citation. Because in APA, without that source and author acknowledged within the sentence, you will put the author's last name, comma, then the page numbers. So you notice the quotation marks in red. If you want to use a sentence word for word, it's in quotation marks, and page number cite where that was taken from. And there you go. That's a line by line comparison again. And looking at longer quotations, these are exact lines of text longer than 4 lines. Uh, so you do this because the original text is too important to summarize or paraphrase. And when it is longer than 4 lines, you are going to indent. And notice how it doesn't start at the beginning of that upper sentence and it doesn't end there. So it is indented on both sides. And you can use your settings in Word to do that. So there's the exact phrasing and examination. There's space here because there's probably 2 different paragraphs in the original text. And at the end, we have the page number where this came from. So notice here at the beginning of the original sentence, in American Origin, that's the source, David Russell argues. And then we have the page number letting us know where it came from. So all those elements have to be there. So, in summary, avoiding plagiarism by citing every source used, including social media posts, conversations, etc. Sources should be paraphrased, summarized, or put in quotation marks. Next up is how to cite sources using the APA format for references and in-text citations.